The chitinous grip on Dr. Remy's arms would probably leave bruises. Probably being the operative word, considering the Vrachnid's exoskeleton had a structural weak point right at the third joint that would shatter quite spectacularly with the right application of force. Not that she was planning anything of the sort. She was, after all, just a simple combat medic. "Watch it, boys. Some of us didn't evolve with convenient built-in armor," she quipped as they dragged her through the prison ship's corridors. The harsh purple lighting glinted off their carapaces, and Remy made a mental note of how it highlighted the gap between their thoracic plates. Another structural weakness. She was practically drowning in them at this point. The taller guard chittered something that her translator rendered as, "Silence, soft flesh. You should be grateful we're only imprisoning you." Remy barely suppressed a snort. The last time someone called her soft flesh, she demonstrated exactly how much damage said soft flesh could do. That had been during the Rigel incident, back when... No, best not to dwell on those memories. That was classified information, after all. Just like her actual rank, combat record, and the real reason she'd allowed herself to be captured by these oversized cockroaches. Just saying, as your prisoner's designated medical officer, I feel obligated to point out that unnecessary roughness could constitute a violation of intergalactic conventions regarding prisoner treatment. She paused for effect. I'd hate to have to file a strongly worded complaint. The guards exchanged what she assumed was their species' equivalent of an eye roll. Their mistake was taking her babbling as a sign of fear rather than what it really was. Careful observation of their patrol patterns, security protocols, and the ship's layout. They rounded another corner, and Remy's internal mapping of the vessel updated. 3 levels down from the command deck, 2 up from engineering. The vibrations through the deck plating told her all she needed to know about the ship's drive configuration. Standard Vrachnid carrier class, if she wasn't mistaken. And she rarely was. "Your medical skills will be put to good use," the shorter guard announced, as they approached a heavily reinforced door. "We have a particularly troublesome specimen that requires attention." Remy allowed a flicker of concern to cross her face. "I should warn you, my experience with non-human patients is somewhat limited. I usually just patch up my fellow soldiers. You know, Band-Aids, aspirin, the occasional field surgery under fire. Nothing too exciting." The guard's mandibles clicked in what her extensive xenobiological training identified as amusement. They genuinely believed they'd captured nothing more than a standard combat medic. It was almost cute, in a tragically mistaken sort of way. As they approached the cell block, Remy's thoughts drifted briefly to her last mission briefing. "Remember," her superior had said, "this is strictly a reconnaissance operation. No engagement unless absolutely necessary." Well, technically, she hadn't engaged anyone yet. And if things went according to plan, she wouldn't have to. But plans had a funny way of evolving, especially when dealing with a certain cybernetically enhanced operative who'd gone missing 3 months ago. The cell door hissed open, revealing a darkness broken only by a pair of glowing cybernetic eyes. Remy smiled. Time to get to work. The guard's idea of introducing Remy to her new cellmate involved a particularly enthusiastic shove that sent her stumbling into the dimly lit space. The cell door sealed behind her with an ominous hiss, leaving her alone with the massive shape lurking in the shadows. Well, alone except for the obvious surveillance devices scattered around the ceiling. Amateur hour as far as hidden cameras went. "Here's your new doctor, beast," one of the guards announced through the intercom. "Try not to eat this one." Remy brushed off her uniform, making a show of looking nervous as her eyes adjusted to the low light. The shape in the corner resolved itself into something that would have sent most medical professionals running for the hills. A cybernetically enhanced wolf the size of a small horse, complete with gleaming metal additions and eyes that glowed an unnatural blue in the darkness. "Oh," she said, deliberately pitching her voice higher than normal. "You didn't mention my patient was a Canis lupus subspecies. I assume those are Rothenberg-Marcus cybernetic enhancements?" "Mark 7, if I'm not mistaken." The wolf's head tilted slightly, one ear twitching forward. "I have to say," she continued, pulling her medical kit from her shoulder, "whoever did your neural integration work was either a genius or completely insane. Probably both. Those connection points along your cervical vertebrae should have triggered a massive rejection response, unless..." She paused, pretending to squint at the wolf's neck. "Oh, you clever bastards. You used quantum-stabilized titanium alloy, didn't you?" A low rumble emerged from the wolf's throat, somewhere between a growl and what might have been a chuckle. Most medics, it spoke in a surprisingly human voice, don't usually start with a technical analysis of my upgrades. Most medics, Remy replied, deliberately keeping her back to the nearest camera, don't have level 7 clearance in experimental cybernetics. She tapped her name badge. Dr. Remy, Combat Medical Division. Her fingers subtly signed out additional information in old Special Forces hand code. Commander, Black Echo Unit. The wolf's cybernetic eyes flickered, a gesture Remy recognized as the equivalent of a wink. W-317, he responded, though some used to call me Marcus. His own paw shifted in what looked like a casual stretch, but spelled out, extraction incoming? Well, W-317, Remy said brightly, opening her medical kit. Let's take a look at those wounds I'm sure you have. Can't have our favorite test subject dying of infection, can we? Her hands signed, 72 hours max. Play along. What followed was perhaps the most unusual medical examination in history, with Remy chattering away about basic first aid, while she and Marcus carried on an entirely separate conversation through subtle gestures and coded phrases. This laceration looks nasty, she commented, cleaning a genuine wound on his flank. Ship layout confirmed. Had a disagreement with the guards, Marcus rumbled, wincing convincingly. Command deck heavily fortified. Engineering accessible through maintenance shafts. Might need stitches. Tell me if this hurts. Weapons? Everything hurts, Doc. Armory 2 levels up. Biometric locks. Remy pulled out a suture kit, noting how the guards on the monitors seemed to be losing interest in their conversation. You know, she said, starting to stitch, I had a wolf as a pet once, much smaller than you, obviously. Used to help me practice emergency field medicine. Marcus's ear twitched. Used to help you practice combat maneuvers, more like. Terrible patient, she continued, her hands steady as she worked. Always growling, never sitting still. Reminded me of some of my more difficult human patients, actually. Remember Buenos Aires? I'm sure I'll be much better behaved, Marcus replied, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. Like that time you accidentally blew up an entire compound? Oh, I highly doubt that. Remy finished the stitches with a flourish. There, all done. Though I'll need to check these regularly. Don't want them getting infected. Daily contact established. The intercom crackled. Are you finished, medic? Just about, Remy called back, packing up her supplies. Though I'll need to monitor the patient. These cybernetic interfaces can be tricky. Rejection can set in at any time. She turned to Marcus and added in a stage whisper, Try not to pull your stitches this time, okay? Marcus bared his teeth in what any observer would interpret as a threatening gesture, but Remy recognized as his attempt at a grin. No promises, Doc. As the guards returned to escort her out, Remy allowed herself a small smile. The Vrachnid thought they'd just witnessed a nervous medical officer attempting to treat a dangerous creature. What they'd actually observed was a reunion of 2 of the most lethal operatives in human space, planning what would soon become a very, very bad day for their captors. The cell door closed behind her, and Remy resumed her act of the slightly too chatty medic. You know, she told the guard escorting her back to her own cell, I think he's actually quite sweet once you get to know him. The guard's mandibles clicked in derision. Sweet? That monster has killed dozens of our kind. Only dozens? Remy murmured, too quietly for her translator to pick up. Amateur. And how's our favorite patient doing today? Remy chirped as she entered Marcus's cell for what the guards assumed was a routine checkup. Still refusing to maul your doctor? I'm touched. Marcus let out a theatrical growl that made the guard at the door take a nervous step back. The day's still young, Doc. Remy pulled out her medical scanner, positioning herself so the guards couldn't see her face. You know, I've been looking at the other specimens they're keeping here. Fascinating collection. Did you know they have a Centaurian Razor Beast 3 cells down? 6 high-risk targets identified. All military. Really? Marcus's cyber-enhanced eyes flickered with interest. I thought those were extinct. They're building a menagerie of weapons. Oh no, just extremely rare. Apparently this one took out an entire Vrachnid outpost before they caught it. Remy pretended to examine his stitches. The interesting thing about Centaurian Razor Beasts is their unique cardiovascular system. 2 hearts, you see, makes them remarkably difficult to kill. Security rotation changes at 0300 ship time. Skeleton crew. Fascinating, Marcus deadpanned. Any other interesting cellmates I should know about? Other potential allies? Remy pulled out a dermal regenerator, making a show of treating his wound. Well, there's a Proximan phase shifter that supposedly infiltrated their highest security facility. Though personally, I'm more interested in the Arcturian wardrake they brought in yesterday. Did you know they can metabolize plasma energy? 3 elite infiltration specialists, 1 demolitions expert, 2 unknown quantities. The guard at the door shifted impatiently. Less talking, more treating, medic. Sorry, medical curiosity, occupational hazard. Remy fumbled with her equipment, playing up the nervous doctor act. Though speaking of curiosity, I have to ask about these cybernetics. The neural interfaces like nothing I've seen before. Mind if I run a diagnostic? Need access to your combat systems. Marcus made a show of considering it, then gave what appeared to be a resigned huff. Fine, but be careful with the calibration. Full capabilities, but power reserves at 60%. Remy pulled out a diagnostic tool that was actually an encrypted military-grade data terminal. The guards, predictably, hadn't even bothered to check it properly. As she pretended to run tests, she quickly downloaded the ship's maintenance schedules. Seeing some unusual readings here. Might need to adjust your medication. Found our opening. Engineering does full system purge at 0200. Whatever you say, Doc. You're the expert. Marcus stretched, his mechanical joints whirring. Though I have to ask, how does simple medical officer end up in this lovely establishment? Why did they really send you? Remy's hands stilled briefly. Wrong place, wrong time. You know how it goes. She leaned in closer, ostensibly examining his neck ports. Though between you and me, I might have deliberately put myself in the wrong place. Entire unit mobilized when you went dark. Took 3 months to track you. Marcus's tail twitched. Surprise. Carefully hidden. Seems like a lot of trouble for one doctor to go through. You shouldn't have risked it. Well, I have this thing about leaving people behind. Remy's voice was light, but her hands signed emphatically. Partners watch each other's backs. Always. The guard cleared his throat. Time's up, medic. Just a moment, Remy called back. Need to administer his medication. She pulled out a vial and syringe, making sure the guards could see her doing something medical-looking. In reality, she was passing Marcus a microtransmitter disguised as a pain relief implant. This might sting a bit. Comms activated. 0200 tomorrow. You know what they say about doctors and sadism, Marcus rumbled, playing his part perfectly. Ready when you are, Commander. Remy packed up her kit, but paused at the door. Oh, almost forgot. There's a fascinating article about Terran wolves I've been meaning to share. Did you know that in ancient Earth mythology, wolves were sometimes seen as healers? They were associated with medicine gods who could both cure and cause disease. She smiled brightly at the guards. Isn't xenobiology wonderful? The guards exchanged a look that clearly questioned her sanity, but Remy's seemingly innocent ramble had just confirmed their escape plan. She would create a medical emergency that would require moving Marcus to the ship's infirmary, coinciding perfectly with engineering systems purge. As she was led back to her cell, Remy reflected on how the Vracnids' arrogance had made this almost too easy. They were so convinced of their technological superiority that they hadn't even bothered to upgrade their security protocols. Their surveillance was primitive, their guard rotations were predictable, and they actually believed that keeping their specimens in separate cells would prevent any coordination. Most amusingly, they'd assigned their simple medical officer full access to the prison medical facilities. Apparently, the concept of weaponizing medical equipment had never occurred to them. Remy's fingers brushed against the modified dermal regenerator in her kit, now reprogrammed to emit a focused electromagnetic pulse, and smiled. She had enough medical supplies in her kit to equip a small tactical team. Back in her cell, Remy began her usual routine of push-ups and stretches, exercises that looked like nervous energy to her captors, but were actually combat preparation techniques. Tomorrow would be interesting, to say the least. I'm concerned about W317's cybernetic integration, she told the guard who brought her evening meal. Those systems can be very unstable. If something goes wrong, the damage could be catastrophic. The guard's mandibles clicked dismissively. We have contained far worse than your wolf, medic. Remy took a bite of her food to hide her smile. Oh, I'm sure you have, but better safe than sorry, right? That's why they pay us doctors the big bucks risk management. After the guard left, Remy lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling as she ran through the plan one more time. In less than 24 hours, the Vrachnid would learn an important lesson about underestimating human medical professionals. And if things went really well, she might even get to demonstrate some of her more unconventional medical techniques. Time for some aggressive therapy, she whispered to herself, and closed her eyes to rest. Tomorrow would be a very busy day indeed. The emergency klaxons went off exactly at 0157 ship time, 3 minutes ahead of schedule. Remy had to admire Marcus's timing. His simulated seizure was perfectly choreographed. Medical emergency in cell block D, Remy shouted, pounding on her cell door. The cybernetic interface is going critical. We're looking at a potential cascade failure. The guard's translator crackled with confusion. What does that mean, medic? It means, Remy explained with exaggerated patience, that if his neural net overloads, the resulting feedback could fry half the electrical systems in this sector, including your life support. That got their attention. Within minutes, she was being rushed to Marcus's cell, where the massive wolf was thrashing convincingly, his cybernetic components sparking in the impressive display of pyrotechnics. Oh, this is bad, Remy muttered, running her scanner over him. The primary neural shunt is redlining. We need to move him to the medical bay immediately. I need proper diagnostic equipment. Impossible, the head guard chittered. The specimen is too dangerous to move. Remy rounded on him, channeling every frustrated doctor she'd ever met. Listen here, you oversized cricket. In about 10 minutes, his cybernetic systems are going to overload. Best case scenario, he dies messily. Worst case, the feedback pulse fries every piece of electronics in a 50-meter radius, including your atmospheric processors. Ever tried breathing vacuum? It's not fun. As if on cue, Marcus let out a particularly violent spasm that sent one of the guards scrambling backward. The lights in the corridor flickered ominously. See that? Remy gestured frantically. The interference is starting already. We need to move him now. The guard captain's mandibles clicked rapidly, their equivalent of nervous fidgeting. I must consult with command. Sure, take your time, Remy said sweetly. I'm sure your superiors will be thrilled to explain to high command why their prize specimen's brain exploded because you couldn't make a simple decision. The captain barked orders in their native language, and more guards arrived with a reinforced hover stretcher. As they secured Marcus, Remy noticed them taking a route she hadn't mapped yet, a direct service corridor to the medical bay. Perfect. Careful with his head, she snapped as they negotiated a corner. Those cervical implants are delicate. One wrong move and... She paused as heavy footsteps approached from an intersecting corridor. Oh, wonderful. More delays. The new arrival was instantly recognizable as the ship's commander. Their carapace bore the distinctive markings of high rank. They swept in with the particular brand of arrogance that Remy had come to expect from Vrachnid leadership. So, the commander's translator rendered their clicks in a smugly aristocratic tone. Our dangerous beast is having technical difficulties? Nothing I can't handle, Remy replied tersely. If we get him to proper medical facilities in the next 5 minutes. The commander's head tilted. Fascinating. You know, when we captured this specimen, it took an entire squad of our finest warriors. 3 didn't survive, and now here he is, helpless. Marcus chose that moment to let out a particularly pitiful whimper. Remy had to resist the urge to applaud his performance. Yes, very impressive, she muttered, making a show of checking his vital signs. Now, unless you want your impressive trophy to suffer catastrophic neural collapse, I suggest we keep moving. Of course, the commander practically purred, though I must say for someone so dangerous, he seems quite docile in your presence. Almost as if... They leaned closer, mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Almost as if he recognizes something in you. Remy blinked innocently. Well, I do have an excellent bedside manner. Now, about that medical bay? The medical bay, the commander gestured magnanimously, is through the secondary maintenance shaft. More secure than the main corridors, you understand. Can't have our primitive allies seeing our prize specimens. Primitive? Remy's laugh had just the right note of nervousness. I mean, yes, humans might not have your advanced exoskeletons or ship technology, but we manage. Indeed, the commander's tone dripped condescension. You manage so well that your finest warrior now lies helpless, dependent on a simple medical officer for survival. It's almost poetic. Marcus's next seizure somehow managed to send sparks specifically in the commander's direction, causing them to step back hastily. Remy made a mental note to compliment his aim later. Speaking of survival, she pressed, those readings are getting worse. Much worse. So unless you want to test how well your exoskeleton handles electromagnetic pulses, proceed, the commander waved dismissively. But know that you are being watched. Any suspicious behavior. Yes, yes. Horrible death, painful execution, all that fun stuff. Remy was already directing the guards to move the stretcher. Now, if we're done with the villainous monologuing, as they made their way through the maintenance shaft, notably free of surveillance devices and conveniently close to engineering, Remy caught Marcus's eye. His cybernetics flickered in a pattern that translated to showtime. Remy made a show of adjusting his restraints while signing back. 5 minutes to systems purge. Try not to start the party early this time. She could have sworn the wolf actually winked at her. Almost there, she announced loudly. Everyone ready for some exciting emergency medicine? The guards had no idea just how exciting things were about to get. The medical bay's lights flickered precisely at 0200 hours. Remy, who had been fussing over various pieces of medical equipment, checked her watch with theatrical concern. Oh dear, she said, voice dripping with false worry. That can't be good. The guard captain's mandibles clicked nervously. What's happening? Probably just routine power fluctuations, Remy replied, pulling out what appeared to be a standard medical stabilizer. Though with these readings, we should probably secure the patient. You know, just in case. The captain stepped closer to examine the device's display. Remy almost felt bad about what happened next. Almost. The stabilizer discharged its electromagnetic pulse directly into the captain's neural cluster, dropping them instantly. Fun fact about Vrachnid anatomy, she announced to the stunned room. Their central nervous system is particularly vulnerable to electrical disruption. Who knew? Marcus chose that moment to demonstrate exactly why cybernetic enhancement of an already lethal predator might be a bad idea. His restraints, which Remy had deliberately left loose, didn't so much break as explode outward. The nearest guard barely had time to reach for their weapon before several 100 pounds of augmented wolf introduced them to the wall at high velocity. I do love it when a patient makes a miraculous recovery, Remy quipped, already moving. The modified dermal regenerator in her left hand spat out a concentrated burst of ionized particles, effectively tasering 2 more guards. Though I should probably warn you about possible side effects, may include headaches, nausea, and severe cases of getting your thorax caved in. You know, Marcus growled, his cybernetic limbs whirring as he dispatched another guard with surgical precision, most doctors focus on avoiding casualties. Remy ducked under a plasma bolt and responded by throwing what appeared to be a simple medical scanner. It detonated with a concussive blast that sent 3 more guards flying. I prefer a more holistic approach to healthcare. Sometimes you have to break a few exoskeletons to make an omelet. The remaining guards were backing toward the door, finally realizing that they might have catastrophically underestimated their prisoners. One of them managed to hit an alarm panel before Marcus relieved them of their arm. Oh good, Remy said, accessing a medical terminal while casually kneecapping another guard with a repurposed bone saw. I was worried this would be too easy. Her fingers flew over the console, bypassing security protocols with practiced ease. Engineering systems are still purging. We have about 3 minutes before their backup comes online. Marcus prowled to the door, his cybernetic eyes scanning the corridor. Company coming. Lot of it. Fantastic. Remy finished her hack and grabbed her medical kit, now revealed to be a compact arsenal of weaponized medical equipment. Remember that time in Nueva Santiago when we had to fight our way through an entire mercenary battalion with nothing but a field surgery kit? You mean when you performed unauthorized appendectomies on half the garrison? Marcus's mechanical joints hummed as he settled into a combat stance. Good times. The first wave of reinforcements rounded the corner, plasma rifles charged. Remy responded by throwing what looked like a collection of medical patches. They detonated in a cloud of neurotoxic gas, harmless to humans and cybernetically enhanced wolves. Considerably less pleasant for insectoid aliens. You know, she commented, stepping over the twitching forms, for a species that prides itself on military superiority, they really should have searched my medical supplies more thoroughly. To be fair, Marcus replied, his augmented strength making short work of a security door. Most people don't expect a doctor to weaponize bone graft compound. They moved through the ship with the practiced efficiency of veteran operators, Remy's medical equipment, and Marcus's cybernetics, complementing each other perfectly. Any guards they encountered quickly learned why challenging a combat medic and a cyberwolf might be hazardous to their health. Remember, Remy called out as they approached engineering, we need at least one of them conscious enough to work the controls. Conscious, Marcus confirmed, slamming two guards' heads together with mathematical precision. Not necessarily comfortable. The engineering bay's doors were sealed, but Remy just smiled and pulled out her last medical surprise, a canister of what was supposedly emergency sealant foam. Stand back. This might sting a bit. The foam ate through the door's molecular structure in seconds. I should really write a paper on the unconventional applications of medical supplies, she mused as they stepped through the smoking hole. Though I suspect the ethics board might have some questions. The engineering crew's resistance was brief and ultimately futile. Remy's expertise in anatomy proved just as effective for incapacitation as it did for healing, while Marcus's cybernetic enhancements let him move faster than their targeting systems could track. Now then, Remy addressed the remaining conscious engineer, her voice cheerfully professional. I'm going to need ship-wide access, and you're going to help me get it. Don't worry, I'm a doctor. This will only hurt if you make it hurt. The engineer, displaying more wisdom than their security forces, immediately complied. Incoming transmission from the bridge, Marcus reported, his cybernetics interfacing with the ship's systems. The commander sounds upset. Remy activated the comm system. This is Dr. Remy speaking. I'm afraid your security forces are experiencing some technical difficulties. Nothing serious, just some mild cases of unconsciousness, temporary paralysis, and possibly a few fractured exoskeletons. I'd offer to treat them, but I seem to have depleted my medical supplies in creative ways. The commander's response was predictably colorful. Also, she continued brightly, you might want to update your threat assessment protocols. Turns out your simple medical officer is actually a special forces commander with extensive combat experience and a really creative approach to medical equipment. And that dangerous beast you were so proud of capturing? He's my partner. We have this whole routine worked out. Marcus's tail wagged slightly. Should we tell them about Buenos Aires? Let's not spoil all our secrets. Remy finished her work at the console. Ship's ours. Want to help me free the other specimens? I believe we have a Centaurian razor beast who might appreciate a chance to stretch their legs. As alarms blared and chaos erupted throughout the ship, Remy couldn't help but reflect on the situation's irony. The Vrachnid had wanted to collect the galaxy's most dangerous creatures, and in doing so, they'd inadvertently brought together everything they needed for their own defeat. You know, she remarked as they headed toward the detention block, casually stepping over the unconscious forms of their former captors, I think this might be my most successful medical intervention yet. Marcus's mechanical laugh echoed through the corridors. Your bedside manner could use some work. Critics, Remy sighed, readying another medical device as more guards approached. Everyone's a critic. Remy lounged in the commander's chair on the bridge, feet propped up on the console while she fiddled with what remained of her medical supplies. Around her, freed specimens from various species were helping secure the ship, many of them turning out to be military specialists themselves. The Vrachnid really should have been more selective in their collecting habits. Black Echo Actual, this is Nightingale, she spoke into the comm. Mission accomplished, package secured, plus some interesting bonus acquisitions. Ready for pickup at your convenience. The response came through instantly. Copy that, Nightingale. Extraction team is 20 minutes out. Good to have you back, Commander. Marcus, who was busy interfacing with the ship's systems through his cybernetics, turned his mechanical eyes toward her. Commander, you mean all this time, you were actually… The head of the unit? Yes, Remy grinned. Surprise! Though to be fair, you were a bit occupied with being the most dangerous specimen to notice the signs. I knew there was something familiar about your combat style. He shook his massive head. The infamous Commander Remy of Black Echo, pretending to be a simple medical officer. No wonder Buenos Aires went so spectacularly wrong. Excuse you, Remy protested. Buenos Aires went exactly according to plan. The explosion was merely an enthusiastic interpretation of medical procedures. You turned an entire medical bay into an improvised missile launcher. Creative problem solving is an important skill for any medical professional. She checked the ship's sensors. Oh look, the Vracnid High Command is requesting an update from their captain. Should we tell them? Marcus's mechanical components whirred in what she recognized as his version of a chuckle. Be my guest. Remy cleared her throat and activated the comm. This is Commander Remy of Human Special Forces speaking. I'm afraid your collection crew is currently indisposed, though I'd be happy to submit a detailed medical report on their conditions. Would you like that alphabetically or by severity of injuries? The silence that followed was deeply satisfying. Oh, and one more thing, she added cheerfully. You might want to update your species threat assessment protocols, specifically the section about human medical personnel. We're not all just healers, you know. Some of us specialize in extremely aggressive preventative medicine. As their extraction team's ships appeared on the sensors, Remy could already imagine the ripples this would create through the galaxy. The legend of the human combat medic who turned a prison ship's medical supplies into an arsenal would make for interesting reading in alien military academies. You know, Marcus mused as they watched their reinforcements approach, your bedside manner really is terrible. Remy smiled, patting her depleted medical kit. Maybe, but my results? Those are to die for.